Hello there and good evening. Greetings from beautiful but gray United Kingdom. I hope you all had a great week and I hope that you're ready for more photography reviews. Now, if you've never been here before, my name is Jakub and I'm a professional photographer based in West Sussex, England, and I'm back with more of the photography reviews. Now, let me quickly have a look at how we're doing across all the different channels where we're broadcasting. So it seems like again we have a little bit of a difficulty with broadcasting on Facebook, something we also seen last week. So let me just quickly double check if I can do anything with it right now. Otherwise, we're going to continue just here on YouTube. So quickly double check. Seems that it's not running on Facebook again. Shame for that. I will definitely investigate and see what we can do with that going forward. However, for those who are watching here on YouTube, good evening to all of you. Thank you for joining me once again for the live photography review show. While people are arriving, please make sure that you jump into the comments, just say hello, where you're watching from, and that would be great to start with. So let's get the most important things out of the way. First of all, photography review show, what we do, we look at your images and we always look at it in 3 steps. First, we look at the technical part of the image. This is where we look at the camera settings, the exposure, the sharpness, the noise, and all these little things starting from there. After that, we look at the image from the artistic point of view, from basically things like composition, main subject, storytelling, and all these things that makes the picture stand out. And then if we have a time, I try to give you some tips and tricks on how you could edit your image differently. Sometimes we look at different crops, different adjustments, and all of that just to help you to keep pushing your photography forward. So what basically happens is we have a photographer sending us their images, and all the photographers and photos you're going to see are part of our Clever Photographer Academy. Right now, how you can join us and how you can submit your images, it's really simple. All you need to do is to join our Clever Photographer Plus membership. And to do that, you can jump onto our website, cleverphotographer.com/forward membership. And there, for a little fee, you can join our membership where you get access to this photography review show. You can send your own images. You get access to our Clever Photographer Academy Facebook group. And on the top of it, which is probably the most important perk, you get a monthly set or monthly bundle of digital photography tools. Now, this usually includes between 200 or 300 assets, and it includes everything from Lightroom, Photoshop, or Luminar Neo presets, LUTs, textures, overlays, custom brushes for Lightroom, sometimes even things like Photoshop actions, and so much more. It's always bundled in one theme. So, for example, last week we released brand new bundle for August, and this time it's summer travel photography bundle. So it has things like travel photography presets and travel LUTs, and it's just lots of fun. So make sure you find out more about it by going to our website, cleverphotographer.com/forward membership. So looking at people joining us, Zdeněk is here. Zdeněk, thank you very much for joining us again. Good evening to you, to South Africa. Tony is, I believe, all the way from Essex. Good evening to you too. I'm all good. Really excited for new set of images. Now we have 3 more shows scheduled for August, and then I'm away for 2 or 3 weeks. But I'll be back towards the end of September. Now, if you're looking for the new dates and new links, they are all available already in the Facebook group or in the membership. So make sure you get them there. So this is all out of the way. We have people watching. If you're watching us live, thank you for joining us. Make sure that you write in a comment where you're watching from and just say hello. Otherwise, if you're watching on replay, thank you for watching and thank you for joining us. So I think all of this is out of the way. Now we have lots of beautiful images to look at. So let's start. So starting from the top, we're going to start with 3 landscape photographers. And the first photographer we're going to look at is David. David sent us 2 images. one almost panorama capture of these beautiful dunes with this really golden hour feel. And then we have this black and white cityscape capture. So let's start with the first image right here and jump straight away into the camera settings. So this image was captured. Actually, let me make sure that I'm zooming so you can see more of the screen. So this image was captured with Nikon D800, the lens 24 to 85 millimeters, and from the camera settings, ISO 400, 85 millimeters, f11, and 1/50th of a second. So looking at it, lovely landscape capture, lots of details on it. When it comes to camera settings, obviously the ultimate goal is always to try to stick as close as to ISO 100 as possible to avoid adding any additional digital noise to the images. However, if it's not possible, I understand that obviously for capture like this, maybe with the people, there is a reason why you went with higher ISO, or maybe it's also the higher f-stop. Either way, I think it should work. Most of the current cameras should handle ISO 400 quite well, and with little bit of a help of post-processing, you should be able to remove that anyway. So let's quickly look at the image. Obviously, there is some really interesting light coming from the side. Now, once I zoom in, the details from far looks quite nice, but when I zoom in, there's there's a touch of blur on some parts of the image. Now that could be with the compression from RAW to JPEG, or it could be that it's just a little bit soft. So although there is a lots of texture looking at it from far, once you zoom in, you do see just a touch of like blurriness, just a touch of motion there. So something maybe to try to fix with some additional software. But in overall, the light is quite nice. I think the camera setting is quite good as well. The f11 really helping to make sure that there is a sharpness and focus all the way through. 1/50th of a second generally is about as slow as you can go with handheld without a tripod. And in overall, I mean, it's a lovely image. I just think one thing I would keep an eye on is the sharpness. And I really think that it's like a camera shake or motion blur, which is kind of visible on the image. Now, moving on to the artistic part of the image. So looking at that, it's actually very nicely done. I really like the depth of the image where you have the kind of foreground with this more textured part of the image. Then you have some kind of plants. Then you go in the middle where you see some people standing all the way at the back on the dune, which also actually helps quite well with the scale. So very well done with the depth, very well done with the scale, nicely done with foreground, middle ground, background as well. So lots of things are right here. I really like the crop. I like the cinematic crop as well, which really give it like more intensity and more impact. So lots of things done right here and well done. Now, just keep an eye on using lots of frequent texture on a foreground. So that often can be texture like this, where there's lots of dots, or sometimes it's like a grass in the water or grass in general. When it's a little bit too much of it, it can be a little bit distracting from the rest of the image, simply because the eyes get attracted to it quite a lot. So this is quite good because it's small. However, it's a lots of it there. So just keep an eye on it on your own images. High frequency texture on a foreground can be sometimes a little bit difficult. So moving on, this picture quite well, quite nice. Post-processing, not much I would add here. Maybe remove a little bit of the contrast and maybe just lower a little bit the warmth, but in overall, I think it's nicely done. Moving on the second picture, this is more kind of monotone or image capture right here. I'm not sure if it's completely black and white because I see a little tone in it, but maybe it's just my screen. I just see a little fade in it. Anyway, still, let's have a look at it. Starting from looking at the camera data, it was captured with the iPhone. Obviously, with the mobile phone, sometimes the camera details are not necessarily as straightforward as with like DSLR or mirrorless cameras, but still ISO 100, 6.9 millimeters, f1.8, and 1/5000th of a second. So that all looks quite nice. It's nicely done. There's a lovely level of details in it, lovely clarity and texture standing out, creating quite nice, sharp, dramatic image. So nothing really wrong there. I like the texture in the sky. It's also nicely done. The contrast, the light is quite decent. Yes, maybe it's a little bit stronger, but it creates quite nice kind of dramatic scene. Often when we photographing at this time of the day, when maybe the light is stronger or it's not that the colors are not that super interesting, the black and white can work quite well. Which brings us to the artistic part of the image, where I think it's an interesting scene. And yes, there is lots of texture. It's very kind of industrial, but looking at it immediately, it's a bit difficult to say what exactly you're trying to show. Now, there are some leading lines which work quite well. There's a nice dramatic sky, and then you have again lots of texture around, lots of kind of drama created by the contrast, but it's difficult to just kind of grasp what exactly you're trying to show. What is it you're trying to show us other than the whole scene like this? So it's just kind of missing like a focal point, something that it would be pointing to, but that's just something to kind of think on in the future. I actually think that the square cropping works quite nicely here. I think that's quite a good idea. So all in all, it's a lovely image. It's well captured. It's quite nicely edited with the clarity and texture. It's just maybe it's kind of, like it's missing your kind of Eiffel Tower or Big Ben or something real strong focal point, which would then add a little bit more to the overall scene. That's all. It's not a big deal. It's just something to think of in the future. So all in all, both pictures very, very nice, David. Thank you very much for sharing them with us. This is great. Obviously, you could push it further if you would go for that really dramatic look. You could crop it even further. You could, for example, go to reduce a little bit more of the top if you would want to, something like this, and maybe a little bit from the bottom. So then you would end up with something like this. And here in Luminar Neo, for example, you can use this dramatic tool, which can really push it. It basically play around with contrast and clarity and texture and the brightness of the image. So you could do something like that, and then really apply like a strong vignette and then position it towards some kind of focal point again. So maybe like here, and add a little bit of inner light there. So you would end up with maybe something like this, and it would be just a little bit more dramatic than at the beginning. So maybe before and after, and it's just something a little bit different to try. So David, thank you for sending us your pictures. It was my pleasure to review them. And now it's time to move forward and on to the other images. So now we are looking at pictures from Elizabeth. Elizabeth sent us two landscape captures right here. Now, they both captured by mobile phone, Samsung Galaxy S22. Now, you're always impressed by what these phones are able to capture. It's unbelievable. But starting from the beginning, again, looking at the camera details, that they're not always as straightforward. Obviously, because of the size of the phone and size of the lenses. However, still, let's go through it. So again, Samsung Galaxy S22 with this one on the camera settings on ISO 40, f2.4, and 1/620th of a second. So quite nicely captured. Obviously, this is more kind of painterly capture. You can see already straight from the beginning, looking at the sharpness here. It almost looks like you brushed it with like a paintbrush rather than actually capturing with the phone. That could be because of a low light or maybe some noise reduction applied to it. But actually, in overall, my first impression when I look at the image, I think it works quite well. I think it's actually really nicely done. That foreground here, which actually normally would be probably really busy for the scene, but because it's almost this kind of soft and like watercolor look, it kind of isn't that distracting, and it creates a really nice foreground, and then your eyes get guided through the valley with the fog or the mist, starting from the front here where there you have like a darker part, and then you go through the valley different and looking at the different mountains, different shades of dark green, dark, and I think it actually works really well. I really, really like this picture. It looks very artistic, and I think it's very creative, and it looks great. So this is a great example where you can take your mobile phone photo where maybe the result isn't 100%. However, when you add editing and a little bit of artistic look into it, I think it can really end up well. So the post process, so the camera details, yes. As I say again, the technical part, I think maybe you can see that it's not as sharp. However, moving on to the artistic part, I think that's where it's really pretty. So often you see this, you can show somebody to image, and the first reaction of the person is, wow, I love this. However, us as a photographers, we would then start to dig in, look for the noise and look for sharpness and look for the perfect exposure, and we would find mistakes in it. However, I think it's much more important that it create emotions in the people rather than checking all the boxes for the technical parts. Now, if it both works, brilliant. I think that's ultimately the goal, but you want to create the emotion with your photos, and I think this one definitely does it. It's a great capture. I love it. Well done. Minimalistic, but really, really nice. Post processing, I wouldn't change anything. I think it's just really nicely done, nicely cropped, nicely framed, nicely edited into this very moody, low saturated, dark image. Just really, really nice. Now, moving on this image. Now, the first one, you look at it and you immediately everything kind of works there. This one, there's lots of different parts, obviously, again with the mobile phone and probably in a low light situation again. So because we have a similar issue as with the first image, basically there is lots of loss of softness here, lots of loss of details. Again, it really does look like it was painted with a brush. And so you have this kind of foreground here, uh, and then you have a lots of trees where again you're losing a little bit of the details, and then you have the mountain on the top, and then you have the sky above, mix of lots of different colors, different white balances. I think this is maybe where the mobile phone have run into its limits. This is why the first one worked really well, because except the foreground, you didn't really have to fade things like white balance and texture and details and sharpness, where here ultimately, sorry, on the first second picture, you will start to look for those, so you have this kind of color cast over the trees, and then yes, you have a nice rocks with some nice sharpness in it, but then you have the sky which kind of have a different colors, different white balance around. You have some sky in it again, then you're looking at the trees in front which are really out of focus, on they're not sharp, so it's just lots of things happening. So technically, I think that's where it is. I think maybe it was a little bit too much for the camera. For the composition, I think that maybe if this would be as a foreground, I think it's a little bit too far from the main subject. I would probably try to avoid this altogether, in doing something probably more like this, not necessarily completely turning it around very quickly. Like this, I would probably look more for view, really focusing just on the mountain. I would probably try to avoid this part as well. Just position it in the middle so it's more balanced on either side and focus on that. Now, these trees, like you have it on your image, can work. However, they are so far at the bottom, away from the main subject, that then it just gets distracting and it just gets lots of stuff. So you have your sky, which is quite dramatic, and then you have your main subject, and you have a lots of trees, and then you have more trees, and you have grass. I think it's just overwhelming. Now, looking at it, you can see the reflection on a lake. So let's say if you would be standing somewhere here and you would be able to get more reflection of the trees and just use these trees as a foreground and then the mountain, I think it would be probably a little bit more powerful. Either way, Elizabeth, thank you very much for sharing the images with me. It was great. It was great to see them. I love the first one. I think it's really nicely done. And I can't wait to see more pictures soon, which brings us nicely to next landscape photographer and that's Greg. Greg, this is a great capture. I really, really like that. I love the train. I love the drone picture, I would say. Unless you were somewhere really high. Great capture, great composition. Love the smoke or the steam coming from the train. Really nicely done as well. The sky, everything just works. I think it's really nicely done. So let's jump straight to it and let's start talking about this image. Now it's a Hasselblad, but I know one of the drones has a Hasselblad on it. So I wonder if it's a drone image with the a Hasselblad camera on it, or if it's Hasselblad camera and you were on the top of some kind of higher structure. Anyway, it says 24 millimeters. Then it says ISO 100, 12.3 millimeters on the lens, f2.8, and 1/240th of a second. Now, looking at it from far, obviously, we get some texture in the sky, which is nice, all good there. We get lots of details, even down here in a grass, on a train, in a tree as well. So that's quite cool. All the way through. Again, really nicely done. Now, when I zoom in, you get some pixelation, and again, that could be from the JPEG. So I'm not too concerned about it, because I think, again, in overall, this is a perfect example of the image that just works. I think it's nicely done. It's very romantic. The steam trains really works really well as a subject. I think it's something what people immediately like when you show it to them. So it's just great done. Now looking at it, there are two trains in front of each other even here. So that's interesting. You have one here, just really nicely done. So when it comes to obviously composition and an artistic part of the image, lots of things done right here. I like the sky behind, creating nice backdrop. Then there is the movement of the tray coming through the scene. Yes, there could have been a little bit more space there. The movement of the smoke is there. Um, yes, it's just lovely capture. Very nicely done. The focal point as the train works, and everything is good here. Now you could crop it even tighter. You could get reduce a little bit more of the sky if you would want to, but you don't have to. It's just, again, by doing that and by really focusing on the main subject, you're positioning the front of the train on this golden point of your rule of third. So that's often quite powerful. And by cropping it down like this to this panorama view, you're adding more intensity to the scene. I think that always helps, especially when you have a lots of sky, which doesn't necessarily add anything to the overall scene. I think that can help. Little bit of vignette to close the image and focus on the front of the train is always a good idea. And maybe to make it a little bit more vintage, I would add a little bit of the matte fade. Now this can be done also with your curves, or here in Luminar Neo with the matte tool. And I think it just creates nice image. So very well done. Love the image. And let's have a look at the second one. Now, Greg, so this is a lovely sunset right here with the balloon sitting in front of it. I think I've seen balloon picture from you before. Let's jump straight to it. So this actually says immediately DJI. So I'm assuming it's captured by drone, 24 millimeter on it, ISO 100, 8.8 millimeters, f8, and 1/500th of a second. Now it's a lovely image. However, you can see immediately, for example, when I say that when certain part of the image doesn't add anything to the overall story, it doesn't need to be there. So we have the balloon, yes, but it's so far away from everything that it's not really visible. It doesn't add any storytelling to the image. It doesn't add anything to the overall composition. So this is immediately part where I would go in with the cropping and just really get rid of lots of the sky, which is really unnecessary there. Then I would be looking at the factory, or whatever is it here, the houses, and then the rest of the image to see if it adds anything to the overall composition. For me, I would probably crop a little bit of this here, maybe somewhere around here. This way we get the balloon and the sun on this third of the image, which often works quite well. So now let's just hit enter and see if that helps. I think that immediately improves the overall look. After that, I think it's quite nicely done. Yeah, maybe just a little vignette, again, pointing towards the interested part, just brighten it up a little bit. We can use the enhanced AI here in Luminar Neo just to open things up and just to improve the sky a little bit more. If you would really want to play around with it, what I would do, maybe I would actually use the sun rays tool here in Luminar Neo. Again, position it over the sun, and then you can really play around. Now you can bring the sun rays down, really adjust the warmth of it to something like this, and just make it much smaller. So I'm not trying to create new sun, I'm just trying to enhance it. So somewhere around here, just maybe this length, and then overall look somewhere here. again, just somewhere around here. You can even rotate the sun rays, and you probably end up with something like this. Maybe a little bit more glow here, little bit more glow here, and let's see, somewhere around here. Now, once we click here, it's maybe still a little bit too big. So let's have a look at it. Smaller and smaller. Again, place it and place it even further. So somewhere here. And let's have a look at the before and after. And it just helps a little bit, to play around with it and maybe add a little bit more effect into the sun. So again, before and after to make it a little bit more interesting. So we're not adding anything new, we are just enhancing it. So we are done with this and moving forward onto another photographer. Zdeněk was playing around with two flashlights as far as I remember. And I know when I was previewing the images, speed lights, with two speed lights, I was in love with this one. I think this is a great capture. Zdeněk, this is probably one of my favorite captures on these darker backgrounds so far. It's really, really nicely done. Love the details. I love the light. I love the composition. It's just texture, everything really works super well on this image. So really, really well done. Let's jump straight to it. Look at the camera details. Camera, it doesn't say which camera, but it was 50 millimeters Canon lens, ISO 100, 50 millimeters, f10, 1/60th of a second. So as the camera details goes, everything is good there. Again, the light is quite nice. I quite like the fact that there is one coming from kind of bottom part up and the other one from front. I think that works really, really well. And again, I just love it. It just works. It's really, really nicely done. I always think that the green, red, purple works really well with the black background. So that's a great choice there. After that, next thing I like is the light. We already talked about that. Nicely done. Great framing. I think this almost square works really nicely on this, or maybe this square. It's really nicely placed in the middle. Right away, you know what the main subject is. It's clean. It just works well. Now, I don't know if the water was like added to it or you spray on it, but I think that really works well as well. Again, the details, you get details from the front all the way to the back of the flower. Again, really nicely done. Really, really just nicely captured. There's lots of things to like about it. I think it's just really nicely done. What I maybe would try to add, that would be just one thing, is to add a little bit more brightness to this part, because I think since this is white or brighter color, it takes a little bit of the attention away from the rest. So it's a little bit kind of unbalanced. You get my eyes, when I look at it, my eyes first goes to this part and then to the rose. And you would like it to be the other way around. So really simply, I would just add a little bit of extra brightness to the front part. Now, not that much, but that will just help us to decide something like this. And then just very carefully paint over this area. And we can paint even more if we want to, and increase the exposure if we want to. And I think that just helps a little bit to balance it all together. So that's just only thing I would do with it. Great picture, really happy with this result. And you should be too, Zdeněk. Well done. Excellent job. Which brings us to the next picture, and that's the garlic here. Garlic on this fabric. Now, because obviously you've been sending pictures of these product or macro or object photos for quite a long time, I have to say that there is definitely improvement on it based on many things. For example, I love the background. I really like this kind of seamless look that it gives you. There is no sides on it. Actually, the foreground here works quite nicely together, creating this kind of autumny feel of the picture. It's nicely done. Yes, the light is a little bit stronger from this side, but still nicely done. The shadow is quite decent. There's lots of details on it. There is a nice depth to it with a little bit of softness at the back. That's nicely done too. In overall, it's actually really nicely done, and I can see the progress from the past pictures on this. Maybe just still a little bit of lower on this part with the light, but the rest is great. Love the background, really nicely handled. This is great texture. Make everything works together. I think that the garlic as well as the leaves, and just everything is just really nicely set. And I think it's a great progress as well. Now, the rose I love. I think that's a great capture. Second one is just something as we move forward, learning. I think it's great too. Don't know if I would do much things differently. I think it's nicely done in general anyway. Um, a little bit of enhanced AI just to add a little bit more brighter areas on the foreground with a little bit of texture. So you kind of have a look at before and after. That could work. Obviously, as always with me, the vignette goes a long way, adding a little bit more focus on the actual garlic right here. So something like this. If we would want to, we could add a few more details with the details tool. Again, just focusing on the actual garlic. And that's about it. Yeah, I think great. Very well done. Thank you very much, Daniel, for sending both of them over the rows. Super well done. That brings us to another photographer, Stefan. Stefan. Let's have a look at your pictures. So Stefan actually sent us, let's have a look. Lots of these kind of creation created with long exposure and some light sources. It's always very creative. I'm always very happy to see it. However, I don't really have many things I can tell you about them. I mean, let's just jump and run through one of them to give you an idea on how it's captured. This, for example, is created with Canon 5D Mark IV with 24 to 70 millimeters on lens. And from the camera settings, ISO 50, 70 millimeters, f16 and 6 seconds. So I'm assuming that you have some kind of glass ball, and then you have a light which you move around for 6 seconds and you create this kind of composition. It's very creative, definitely something that could be really nicely used for texture or overlay. Maybe it would be better without the glass ball, but it could be really nicely used there. I really like it. I think it's very nice. Maybe I prefer the first one a little bit more, as I think the darker parts give you a little bit more contrast, but still it's nicely done. This picture as well, really nicely done. There is obviously different light streaks coming around again here as well, with the glass ball creating this really nice composition with 6 second long exposure. You can create something like this. Now, Stefan, this one is a lovely picture. It's a lovely composition. However, technically, this is where I really like the long exposure and the movement on this one. This one is just out of the focus, I'm afraid. Looking at it, regardless where I look, my first impression is that it's not really sharp, so it doesn't necessarily look like artistic, but as a contrast of the purples and a darker background, it works quite nicely actually. So it's nicely done. It's a lovely idea. However, I think the first thing that strikes me when I look at it is the sharpness, which is really low on this one. Also, it has these kind of glow edges around it, as you can see. So I'm assuming you done some darkening around, but on some spots it's kind of visible. And that's about it. Yeah. So the first one I would start with, this one is try to find a way on how you can make it sharper, and also how you can balance the background more with the foreground to make sure that it doesn't give you such a contrast, and with that the glow around the main subject. So Stefan, thank you very much for sending all your pictures over. Well done on the long exposure, and I hope I see more of your pictures in the future. Which brings us to Tony. Tony, what do we have here this week? 5 images, 1 bird, and there's some seascape right here. Let's have a look. If I can say, I can't really say where is it. Liverpool across. Liverpool across. Of course, it doesn't show me, but that doesn't matter. It's a lovely picture. So there's a little bit of Liverpool across Mersey from Tony. Then we have this bird right here with beautiful light and beautiful details. Very well done then. Then the ladybug here, also really nicely captured. Again, kind of hidden in this white surrounding, really nicely done. This one it's also interesting. That's the kind of picture you come to have a look at what you're actually looking at. I think there's lots of texture, lots of details on the foreground here, and actually it can work quite nicely too. And then we have this night butterfly or moth or however you want to call it, also nicely done. Little bit noisy, you can see some of the color noise on it, but nicely captured. So what pictures we gonna look at? Starting with this one, let's have a look at the seascape, for example, the Liverpool capture. um, Canon 1000D with 100 millimeters. From the camera settings, ISO 100, 100 millimeters, f5.6, and 1/800 of a second. Tony, well done here. The camera settings are kind of spot on. I don't know, ISO 100 again, ultimate goal there. F5.6. Um, when you shoot this far, what kind of depth did it give you? Now, obviously, you can see that there is a sharpness here. There is still sharpness on the stones. There's maybe little bit of depth on the houses, but not really in general. Generally, in this kind of wider scenes, the depth isn't that visible with lower f-stop, so that works nice. Yeah, the light isn't the most interesting ever. Obviously, it's kind of diffuse day with some light coming from the side, creating a little bit of shadows here, but it's nicely done. What I think would be the first thing I would do, just to crop it a little bit tighter. So I would just quickly jump into the crop and start from there. Now, maybe because I really like the people there, I think that gives us a really nice foreground. Maybe I would do something like this. Let's have a look at it. I think maybe something like this to start with, because I think that the person with the dog is really important here. Gives you a really nice and strong foreground, and also an opener to the whole scene. Also, people, cars, and elements like that can give us a really nice sense of scale and distance. So it's great to include them in it. As long as it's done intentionally, I think it's super cool. So in overall like this, I think it looks really nice. Again, foreground, middle ground, background with the city behind, really nicely done. With a light like this, with the colors, I would probably go for the black and white, because I think, like I say, it's a little bit more forgiving when it comes to the white balance or these kind of daylight captures. You could make it really contrasty, or you could add extra structure to it just to really push it with a strong vignette. Maybe, do something like this, and maybe add a little bit of inner light in the middle, add a little bit of dramatic feel with the dramatic tool, and maybe even some of a fade to really make it more kind of uh, to make more cinematic. You could add a little bit of grain as well if you would want to, just again creating that kind of overall feel and adding a little bit of more vintage to it. If you would want, you could play around with it even further. You could add a little bit of a toning to it, for example. So let's say that you could add a little bit of blue, or maybe just bring it down somewhere around here, and then maybe end up with something like this. So just kind of playing around with it, starting from here, ending up here, a little bit interesting, and a little bit of something else what you can create with the image. But in overall, I think it's nicely done, and it's a great capture. The second image we can quickly look at is, for example, this ladybird right here. So let's zoom on it. Let's have a look at the camera settings. Canon 50D with the 35 to 80 millimeters lens. Now from the camera settings, ISO 640, 80 millimeters, f22, and 1/100 of a second. So from the camera settings, higher ISO, and it's a little bit of visible on some parts, but it's not too bad. So that's quite nicely done. F22 is really high, obviously, but I'm sure you knew what you're doing in a combination with the light and the distance from the subject. Now the subject sadly isn't like a crisp sharp. Now it's sharp, but for me it seems like maybe this part is actually a little sharper than the subject. So that's a little bit of a shame, but still it's nicely done. Because of a contrast, you immediately know what you're looking at, what you're trying to show us. However, I would just wish it would be a little sharper. So that would be my only technical point on this. The light is quite nice. It's not strong. It's coming from the side, obviously creating a little bit of highlights here, but nothing crazy there. Now, what I would do, I would take care of some of these kind of, I don't know if it's a sensor dust or if it's maybe something flying around, just to remove it, just to basically remove any distraction from the viewer. I think it's always good to start by doing that. You can just, in most of the software, you can just select these parts now, and then with one click, they're gonna be removed. And after that, maybe adding a little bit more details, specifically just to the main subject. So here in Luminar Neo, you would that with brush. So you would basically just add the extra details to this part, so to the actual animal. Then I think little vignette to close it and point it more on the actually lady bee here can work quite nicely too. So something like this, and maybe a little enhance AI just to create something like this would be nice too. So let's have a look at it before, something like this, and then after ending up with something like this, maybe a little bit more brightness on her as well would go a long way. Let's have a look quickly. If I do that, now it's probably too strong, but let me still do that. Let's have a look. Not that strong, just maybe somewhere around here. And I think that's quite nice. So before and after, and I think you get a really nice result like this. So Tony, thank you very much for sending all your pictures. Again, I love this one. Lots of lovely details. The background with the movement and motion blur there really works very well too. This one, really nicely done. Again, just the noise, which is a little bit there's lots of it there to a degree when you start to lose a little bit of sharpness. And this one is very intriguing as well. Again, playing around with different textures, different depth can create very interesting compositions. So, Tony, thank you for sharing your images. And it's time to move to wildlife photographers. First one is John. John, let's see what we have here. This is beautiful capture. Lots of beautiful details. I'm assuming it's an eagle or some kind of bird, but it's beautiful. So starting by looking at the camera, this was Nikon D7100. Doesn't tell us the lens data. However, looking at the camera details, this was captured with ISO 900, 300 millimeters lens, or at least that's what it says here, f8, 1/250th of a second. So obviously with 300 millimeters f8 already give you this kind of depth. You can see a little bit of softness at this part of the body and then lots of softness at the background. But most importantly, you get lots of sharpness in the face. And that's really, really pretty, really nicely done. You can see the little hair around. You can see the details on the beak, the eye. The light is really nice here. The composition is really nice. It's just a really nice picture. Really well done. Great capture. And just, yes, I'm very impressed by the result. Well done, John. Great, great, great. For the composition or the artistic part, again, nicely done. I really enjoy the soft background and also the fact that the background has that little bit of that green tint in it, which creates a really nice contrast with the main subject, and it really opens up the image for you. I really like the natural edit, which really makes it very kind of, yeah, it's just very natural. It looks great, you know, the colors, the details and everything, the light. It's just, yes, really, really nice, great, and well handled. Nothing more or I can add to it. Now, looking at the second picture, we are looking at probably some kind of heron. However, it's a lovely bird sitting in front of this pond or sitting and trying to eat something. Let's jump to the camera details on this one. It's a Nikon Z6 with 70 to 300 millimeters. From the camera settings, we were on ISO 100, 200 millimeters, f5.6, and 1/200 of a second. So the camera details, the camera settings is all good there. Nothing I would add. Low ISO, obviously long lens, small or lower f-stop, 1/200 of a second, still give us nice sharpness. When I zoom in, you can see lots of details here, so that's nicely done. The light is quite nice coming from this side, creating a little bit of a shadow here, but it's not distracting at all. What I really enjoy on this picture and moving towards the artistic part is the contrast between the color of the animal and its background. Maybe this piece of grass here is a little bit distracting because it's kind of extra there. I would probably try to remove that, at least in the post-processing, but the rest of it is nice. There is a space in front of the bird, which I think works nicely as well, creating a really nice, strong composition. Maybe I would crop it a little bit tighter again, creating more of a cinematic look. Maybe just somewhere around here, and just kind of focusing more on the bird than the rest of the grass. With erasing this, let's see if actually Luminar Neo can do that with one go, or if we would have to be using clone or something like that. So let's have a look and try it. If it would be just a question of selecting that object and then clicking on erase. So sometimes it works quite well, sometimes it doesn't. Let's just see on this image right here. And I think that would just create, it actually worked quite well. And I think that way it would just give us really nice clean front for the bird. Again, I think with a little bit of vignette, focusing on the bird, it can really create like a nice look. So somewhere like this, maybe not that strong, maybe somewhere around here, and you get this really nice result. So great capture. Little bit of different cropping, maybe can make it a little bit stronger, a little bit of eraser also, remove the distraction from the foreground, and the rest is just great. So, John, thank you very much for sending the pictures over. The eagle was stunning. This is also very interesting. It was great to see your pictures, and I hope to see them and more of them soon. And that brings us to last photographer of this week, and that's Ken. Ken sent us two images. Then now we have these birds right here sitting on this little pole. Nicely done. And then we have this insect sitting on the flower. Now the insect, there is a lot of noise there, although it's nicely done. Actually, the composition itself is nicely done, but you can see the limitations on the camera, I'm afraid. You can see lots of noise at the background. You can see the lack of sharpness. So that's a bit of shame. Also, the file is just a little bit smaller. When you look at it, it's just 1.6 megabytes. So somewhere like 2000 pixels on 1600 pixels. So this is why the quality is kind of smaller. So it's a shame, although it's a lovely composition and a great idea. I think the quality of the image following the camera basically, and it's something that we maybe seen in the past with these Coolpix cameras, they can not always give the great results. However, it's very interesting to see this one. It's a lovely picture. Now, this one is lovely. And yes, there is still noise on it. However, it's much sharper, much more defined. The light is really lovely here. So let's look at it. It's the Nikon Coolpix camera with some of the settings: ISO 640, f6.3, and 1/125th of a second on the shutter speed. So the ISO is higher. Obviously, as with wildlife, it's not always possible to keep it low. F6.3 with almost 300 millimeters give us this kind of nice depth of field. Keeping this out of focus, 1/125th of a second, give us a nice exposure. The light is quite nice here, nicely diffused. The birds facing different direction actually works quite nice, giving us nice depth. Looking at the artistic part, again, it's nicely done. Obviously, the main subject is clear. They both in the screen, they sitting in front of each other, giving us nice depth. Really nice kind of storytelling composition. I know that Ken was writing me in a message that they were basically sitting nearby like a bird feeder. So that's where they gather. So nicely captured together. I think it's a lovely composition. It's nicely done. I like the colors. I really like the fact that you take your time and take these kind of pictures. And thank you very much, Ken, for sending them over. So really nicely done here. Here, unfortunately, you can see the limitation from the camera, which comes in a way of, you see lots of noise, lower sharpness, and lots of pixelation. So that's about it for this week, folks. Thank you very much for sending your images over. Now, I thought it would be a good idea at the end of each of the episode to, let's say, a call my favorite picture of the week. So this is the first time we're going to do that. So let me just quickly go through the images and let me think about that. I haven't really decided yet. Now, I really like the train. That was one picture I really enjoyed. I thought the eagle was really nice as well. Where is it? It already disappeared, the eagle on me. I thought the eagle was great. And I also enjoy this valley here from Elizabeth. Now, looking at it, I will this week say that my favorite picture of the week is Zdeněk's rose. Not necessarily I think the result is brilliant, and I also really appreciate the fact that he keeps trying every week, improving his skills and bringing it to this. So, folks, I'm gonna leave you with the picture of the week. I'm gonna post it on the Facebook group on our Clever Photographer Academy. Well done, everyone, for joining us. Have a great week. Stay safe. Take care. Take your camera out and send me more pictures for the next week episode of our photography review show. Have a lovely evening. Thank you again, and take care.